Harlequins 2009. On April 12th, 2009, Harlequins faced Leinster in a Heineken Cup quarterfinal, trailing 6-5 late in the second half. With one tactical substitution already exhausted wing, Tom Williams suddenly collapses with what appears to be a bleeding mouth. Referee Nigel Owens authorizes a blood replacement, allowing Starfly half Nick Evans, previously subbed off with a leg injury, to re-enter the match. Footage later reveals Williams discreetly biting into a hidden capsule handed to him by a team medic moments earlier. The blood is fake, theatrical, and deliberate. The deception fails to change the final outcome. Harlequins lose 6-5, but it triggers a major investigation by the European Rugby Cup. Williams receives a 12-month ban for misconduct, later reduced to 4 months after cooperation with the inquiry. The incident, later dubbed Bloodgate by British media, becomes the most high-profile cheating scandal in modern rugby history. Its fallout reshapes substitution policy across club and international play. The cover-up attempt sets the stage for the sport's reckoning with medical integrity and internal culture. Dean Richards' fall. Dean Richards, Harlequins' director of rugby in 2009, is identified as the primary architect of the Bloodgate substitution. An internal club investigation and later an ERC tribunal confirmed that Richards orchestrated the use of a fake blood capsule to force an illegal tactical substitution during a tight Heineken Cup quarterfinal. His involvement extends beyond passive oversight testimony, and documentation show he directs medical staff and player Tom Williams to carry out the plan, aware of its breach of competition rules. The investigation also uncovers patterns of similar behavior in prior matches, though not formally charged. On August 17, 2009, the ERC issues a 3-year coaching ban, citing deliberate and systematic deception that undermines the integrity of the sport. Richards resigns from his position within 24 hours, ending a tenure that included 4 premiership titles, with Leicester between 1998 and 2002. His reputation, once defined by winning records and player development, collapses under the weight of orchestrated misconduct. Until Bloodgate, he had never been formally disciplined in over 2 decades of elite rugby. The investigation now expands to other staff, setting up further sanctions in the weeks that follow. Stephen Brennan role. Stephen Brennan, Harlequins' senior physiotherapist during the 2009 Heineken Cup, plays a central role in executing the fake blood substitution. Tribunal evidence shows Brennan handing Tom Williams the capsule moments before the player collapses to the turf, triggering the illegal replacement. Initially, Brennan denies any wrongdoing, but under questioning admits he acted under pressure from senior management. The panel finds that while Brennan did not initiate the scheme, his cooperation was critical to its success. His actions are ruled to have breached both competition integrity and medical ethics. The ERC issues a 2-year ban from all rugby-related activities, citing his professional responsibility to prevent not enabled deception. Brennan claims he feared losing his job if he refused to cooperate, but the tribunal dismisses this as insufficient justification. He does not return to elite rugby following the suspension, effectively ending a decade-long career in sports medicine. His final professional appearance comes not on the pitch but in a Dublin hearing room. The focus now shifts to the player at the center of the event. Fake blood capsule. The physical core of the scandal is a single prop, a blood capsule smuggled onto the pitch inside Tom Williams' sock. During the 74th minute of the April 12, 2009 Heineken Cup quarterfinal, Williams bites down on the capsule, releasing red liquid designed to simulate a split lip. The substance, traced later to a theatrical makeup supplier, is chemically safe, but visually convincing, engineered to pass cursory medical inspection under match conditions. Harlequins staff chose this specific model because it ruptures instantly and leaves no permanent stain, making it ideal for rapid substitution deception. The European Rugby Cup's post-match investigation uncovers that the capsule is disposed of immediately after the game, allegedly destroyed by team staff to eliminate physical evidence. Under scrutiny, the league amends its competition regulations to explicitly prohibit any and all artificial blood devices, closing a loophole that technically hadn't existed until the incident. Prior to 2009, no club had been formally penalized for using theatrical props to force substitutions. That loophole is gone now, but Williams's punishment brings a new kind of attention to the case. Regan testimony. Mark Regan, a veteran England hooker with 46 caps and a World Cup final appearance in 2007, delivers one of the most consequential testimonies of the Bloodgate inquiry. Under oath, he states that Harlequins maintained a culture where players were routinely pressured to exaggerate or fabricate injuries to exploit substitution laws. Regan, who spent most of his club career with Bristol and Leeds, claims he was explicitly told to go down in a prior match to create a tactical advantage, an allegation that reaches well beyond the isolated Williams incident. He never plays another match for Harlequins. The Rugby Football Union uses Regan's testimony to justify a wider cultural audit of the club's medical protocols and substitution patterns dating back several seasons. Internal messages and coaching notes reportedly back up his assertions that medical manipulation was normalized, not exceptional. Regan calls it a stain on the game during his final media appearance before retiring in 2009. The public fallout from his claims feeds into the next round of suspensions and sets the foundation for governing bodies to reassert control. The tribunal moves quickly to establish harsher penalties for future infractions. ERC investigation. The European Rugby Cup launches its formal investigation into Bloodgate in July 2009, just weeks after the quarterfinal between Harlequins and Leinster. Over a 6-week period, ERC officials gather more than 200 pages of testimony, emails, and matchday documentation. The findings uncover not only the Williams incident, but also a pattern of unreported medical manipulation dating back at least 2 seasons. Investigators identify earlier matches in which similar blood substitutions appear to have been used to rotate key players late in close contests. The final report labels it the deepest disciplinary case in European club rugby history, citing systematic deception across multiple levels of the organization. As a direct response, ERC introduces stricter rules for medical substitutions, requiring independent doctors to verify all blood-related replacements. One new protocol mandates post-match blood capsule checks for suspicious injuries. The outcome resets medical governance for every club under ERC jurisdiction. The ripple effect moves next to Twickenham, where the RFU must decide whether to escalate sanctions domestically. Tom Williams returned. Tom Williams returns to the pitch in January 2010, 9 months after faking a blood injury during the Heineken Cup quarterfinal. The crowd at Twickenham Stoop gives him a standing ovation as he takes the field, an act of forgiveness for a player who became the face of rugby's most elaborate deception. His original 12-month suspension is reduced to 4 on appeal, citing cooperation with investigators and admission of guilt. He finishes the season quietly rotating in and out of the Harlequins' backline while media scrutiny shifts toward leadership figures. In 2012, Williams breaks his silence. In an interview with The Times, he states he never wanted to do it but felt trapped by club hierarchy. He describes a moment in the dressing room when he was handed the capsule without warning. The interview reignites public interest in Bloodgate and leads to renewed criticism of how young players are pressured in elite rugby environments. Williams retires in 2015 after 208 appearances with Harlequins, most of them overshadowed by a single-stage substitution. His final whistle comes just as the game's governance prepares its next reform. Media storm. Within hours of the tribunal's findings, mainstream media outlets including the BBC, The Guardian, and Sky Sports publish full breakdowns of the Bloodgate plot. The scandal trends across UK headlines for weeks, with Bloodgate becoming shorthand for systemic cheating in professional rugby. Commentators draw parallels to doping cases in cycling and match fixing in cricket, suggesting that the Harlequins' deception marks a new low in rugby's modern era. The RFU labels it a national embarrassment, citing the reputational damage at both domestic and international levels. The fallout intensifies as European Rugby Cup authorities fine Harlequins $260,000, at the time the largest financial penalty issued by the ERC. Sponsors raise concerns about the club's governance, and World Rugby quietly begins reviewing substitution loopholes. Blood capsules become symbolic of a wider failure to police gamesmanship in high-stakes fixtures. The scandal triggers the sport's biggest image crisis since turning professional in 1995. The governing bodies now face pressure to implement lasting regulatory safeguards ahead of the next season. New rules 2010. In response to the scandal, World Rugby and national unions introduce sweeping regulatory changes ahead of the 2010 season. Independent medical professionals become mandatory at all elite-level fixtures to monitor injury claims, removing substitution authority from team staff. The blood substitution rule is revised to apply only to active visible bleeding, eliminating the ambiguity exploited during the Harlequins match. These measures aim to reduce club-level manipulation and ensure medical credibility across competitions. Compliance protocols also expand. Spot checks are introduced to ensure no blood capsules remain in circulation. After matches, and clubs must now maintain full video records of every substitution for retrospective review. Any failure to meet these conditions triggers automatic sanctions regardless of intent. The new rules mark the first time rugby formally codifies medical substitution oversight as a regulatory priority. With enforcement now external and procedural, the system that allowed Bloodgate to unfold is fundamentally dismantled. Other suspected incidents. Although Bloodgate peaks in 2009, earlier incidents suggest the tactic may have circulated under the radar for years. In 2005, a French top 14 match raises suspicion after a player is substituted for unexplained mouth bleeding, but no formal inquiry follows. 2 years later, during a 2007 preseason match between the Stormers and Saracens officials, note inconsistencies in a blood-related substitution. Yet again, no charges result. Because neither case includes physical evidence or corroborating testimony, governing bodies decline to escalate proceedings. Still, the pattern triggers quiet introspection across domestic and international leagues. Club administrators begin informal reforms well before official mandates arrive, targeting medical substitution integrity and tightening access to pitch-side treatment kits. Even without direct enforcement, the precedent set by Harlequins cast a long institutional shadow. For nearly a decade, Bloodgate remains shorthand for a broader vulnerability in rugby's player welfare rules. The scandal's aftershocks outlast its participants and reset expectations for what's considered legitimate medical intervention. Rugby's image rebuild. By the 2011 Rugby World Cup, governing bodies shift their strategy from damage control to long-term image repair. World Rugby mandates full medical transparency for all international fixtures, requiring independent doctors to monitor injury substitutions from touchline to tunnel. Tournament briefings explicitly instruct coaching staffs on ethical substitution boundaries. Reinforcing that deception, regardless of tactical value, violates both player safety and public trust. These guidelines mirror a wider post-Bloodgate effort to institutionalize sportsmanship through structural reform. Outside international play, national unions and club organizations implement parallel changes. Several top-flight clubs begin hiring compliance officers dedicated solely to matchday protocol enforcement and post-match review. Meanwhile, the World Rugby sponsors player education workshops, aiming to instill early career awareness of ethics around injury deception. The message is consistent and deliberate. The sport cannot afford a second Bloodgate. This reputational reset paves the way for a modernized regulatory culture built on accountability rather than assumption. Dean Richards' comeback. Dean Richards returns to professional rugby in 2012 as director of rugby for the Newcastle Falcons, 3 years after receiving a 3-year coaching ban for orchestrating Bloodgate. Within a single season, he guides the Falcons to premiership promotion, securing a top-place finish in the 2012-13 RFU Championship and a playoff win over Bedford. Despite on-field success, Richards consistently avoids direct comment on the scandal during early interviews, citing legal restrictions and personal fatigue with the topic. His reappearance triggers public debate with fans and media, divided over whether his return represents redemption or unresolved accountability. Supporters highlight Richards' prior achievements, including 4 premiership titles with Leicester, as evidence of coaching ability distinct from the scandal. Critics, however, point to his central role in rugby's most high-profile deception and argue that the sport's credibility remains compromised by his reintegration. The ERC's final report had named him in 12 separate breaches of misconduct. Richard's legacy stays entangled with Bloodgate even as he rebuilds his career in the top flight. The divided reception mirrors rugby's broader reckoning with how it defines integrity after scandal. Blood sub-controversies continue. In 2016, a Six Nations match between France and Wales reignites scrutiny of rugby's blood substitution protocols. During the final minutes, a French front row player exits for a blood assessment, triggering an 8-minute delay before a contested scrum restart. The extended stoppage allows France to regroup tactically and ultimately score a decisive try in the 100th minute, sparking outrage from the Welsh camp. Defensive coach Sean Edwards calls the incident a disgrace, arguing that the stoppage functioned more as strategic timeout than genuine injury management. Although no fake blood is used, the controversy highlights how teams continue to exploit loopholes in substitution rules to gain in-game advantages. The match prompts widespread calls for tighter regulation, particularly regarding stoppage verification and independent medical oversight. In response, tournament officials initiate another review in 2017, aiming to further narrow the scope of acceptable blood substitutions and clamp down on tactical manipulation. Even 7 years after Bloodgate, the system still enables questionable gamesmanship. 2019 Rugby World Cup scrutiny. By 2019, World Rugby implements multiple transparency measures in Japan to prevent any recurrence of substitution abuse. Matchday doctors rotate across fixtures to maintain neutrality, and all medical substitution protocols are integrated into the live broadcast feed, allowing both viewers and analysts to monitor decisions in real time. These changes reflect an explicit effort to restore trust in a system that a decade earlier was compromised by manipulation and deception. Tournament officials also wear body-mounted cameras during medical reviews, creating a verifiable visual record for any disputed incidents. While no major blood substitution controversies emerged during the World Cup, the infrastructure reflects a governing body still on high alert. The continued emphasis on neutral oversight, real-time accountability, and comprehensive documentation indicates that Bloodgate's influence remains embedded in policy. Even without scandal, the rules now presume the potential for exploitation. The tournament concludes without incident, but vigilance stays high as rugby prepares for the next regulatory evolution, documentary fallout. In 2020, BT Sport airs Bloodgate, The Untold Story, a feature-length documentary revisiting the scandal more than a decade later. The film includes new interviews with key figures including winger Tom Williams and physiotherapist Steph Brennan, both of whom provide expanded detail on the incident and its aftermath. Former Harlequins director Dean Richards declines to participate, but archival footage and testimonies reconstruct his role. One of the most damaging revelations centers on a previously unknown internal attempt to obstruct justice. Specifically, the club's lawyer reportedly advised staff to delete incriminating emails during the RFU's investigation. The public response is swift and critical. Although many believe the scandal had run its course, the documentary revives scrutiny and reopens moral debates about systemic complicity. The revelations do not change the sanctions, but they deepen the reputational damage. Media outlets revisit Bloodgate with fresh framing, and fan commentary reflects both renewed anger and disbelief at the scale of the cover-up. The retrospective intensifies pressure on clubs to maintain transparency, just as new digital oversight tools enter common use. Club culture reckoning. In the years following Bloodgate, Harlequins begin a slow and deliberate process of rebranding. By the early 2010s, the club shifts its focus toward academy development and public displays of sportsmanship, framing itself as a hub for ethical player growth. Internal messaging emphasizes long-term trust over short-term gain. Senior players report being told that reputation can't be fixed twice. Performance on the field supports the transformation by 2012. Harlequins win the premiership title with a homegrown core and few disciplinary issues. Fan sentiment recovers gradually. Attendance stabilizes and new marketing campaigns highlight transparency and community engagement. For younger supporters, the scandal becomes a distant memory. For older ones, a lesson in institutional accountability. Yet among some rugby circles, the stigma lingers particularly for former players and staff associated with the 2009 roster. The club's transformation reshapes its identity but never fully severs ties to the event that forced it. The legacy of Bloodgate now exists as a cautionary tale within Harlequin's own halls. Legal aftershock. The legal fallout from Bloodgate compounds the scandal's financial cost. The European Rugby Cup spends over $500,000 on disciplinary and legal proceedings alone, driven by hearings, appeals, and consultations across multiple jurisdictions. Tom Williams, the player at the center of the substitution, considers legal action for emotional distress after serving a 4-month ban and facing long-term reputational damage. Although no formal lawsuit is ever filed, the RFU reportedly settles privately with at least one individual connected to the case. Despite widespread media coverage, no civil case reaches a courtroom or public record, largely because involved parties seek confidentiality over drawn-out litigation. Legal analysts note the case as an example of institutional risk management overriding transparency. As of 2025, Bloodgate still ranks among rugby's costliest off-field events financially, reputationally, and administratively. The scandal's price tag becomes one more factor reinforcing stricter compliance frameworks in the decade that follows. Bloodgate slang. Within a year of the scandal, pulling a Bloodgate becomes informal shorthand across rugby locker rooms for feigning an injury to manipulate the game clock. While not officially condoned, the phrase spreads rapidly through club culture, reflecting how quickly misconduct can shape a sport's vernacular. Coaches begin instructing players and staff to avoid using it in formal settings, and multiple Premiership teams explicitly ban the slang term from official communications. Despite that, it continues to circulate quietly among players off record. Media coverage and fan discourse keep the phrase alive, often using it satirically to describe suspicious stoppages in both rugby and other contact sports. The enduring presence of the term reflects Bloodgate's unique status, not just as a rule violation, but as a cultural watermark in rugby history. Although many view it as a black mark on the sport, its linguistic legacy reveals how deeply the scandal embedded itself in rugby consciousness. The term's persistence ensures Bloodgate remains a cautionary reference point in player conduct discussions across the rugby world. Modern safeguards. By 2023, World Rugby implements strict oversight systems designed to eliminate any ambiguity around player injuries and substitutions. Every top-level match now includes an independent matchday doctor, or IMDD, with sole authority over head injury assessments and return-to-play decisions. Concussion spotters trained professionals watching real-time feeds flag suspicious impacts for immediate review, closing the window for player manipulation. All substitutions are logged digitally with precise timestamps and reason codes submitted directly to the match database. The combination of third-party medical governance and technological documentation renders deception nearly impossible under current protocols. Still, the legacy of Bloodgate lingers in policy language, media scrutiny, and judicial precedent. Every time a player leaves the pitch with blood or head contact, officials and commentators recall the scandal that forced these measures into place. The IMDD system doesn't just safeguard players, it ensures the conditions that enabled Bloodgate cannot quietly return. Fan forgiveness. Harlequins' 2021 Premiership title, their first in 9 years, softens some public resentment. The club overcomes a mid-season coaching upheaval to win 40-38 in the highest-scoring Premiership final in history, sparking a resurgence in supporter pride. Meanwhile, Tom Williams, whose forced role in Bloodgate made him its most visible victim, transitions into rugby administration, working behind the scenes to shape policy. His continued presence in the sport signals professional recovery, but not necessarily universal absolution. Blood capsules. Once a niche theatrical prop, are now explicitly banned under World Rugby medical protocol. The visual shorthand for deception is treated as contraband in every tier of sanctioned play. While many fans argue the game has evolved, others maintain that full trust has never been restored. For them, Bloodgate isn't just a scandal, it's a permanent chapter in rugby's institutional memory. Institutional memory. Institutional memory.